Things are kind of getting juicy. Well, pretty juicy. Uh, Hi, I'm Dina Haynes, and for those of you who have been watching this video book series from the beginning, thanks for being so loyal and for sticking with me. We are about to go into chapter 17, so if you're new, then you're jumping in right in the middle, right when things are kind of getting juicy. Well, you kind of just missed a really big juicy part. But anyway, I would suggest you go back and watch from the beginning. That way you'll understand what's going on in the story, who the characters are. Also, because I'm about to drop some spoilers about the last chapter. And Neesa and Reuben had sex. Neesa ended up crying. So, what was that about? I think she's just unlocking a lot of deep seated insecurities resulting from definitely her last relationship, but perhaps even more. I mean, I think people tend to have patterns in the way that they date and the guys that they date. Definitely drop a comment below if you understand what I'm talking about. I know in my life there are always patterns, and when you find yourself in a bad pattern of relationships or even just in your life, like maybe even a career path, the biggest question is, how do I get out of that? How do I stop this pattern? Like even just to get to the point where you recognize it, then the path of trying to fix it seems so daunting. You kind of seem lost. And I think that's where Neesa is right now. Ben's history is questionable by far in terms of relationships. And is this a guy that I want to hang all of my hurt emotions or damaged emotions on when his track record is not good? And hopefully we find out who that mysterious stranger was in the car that seemed to be following Neesa down the hill. I mean, who knows? It could be that Reuben is just paranoid. He is a PI after all. But, who knows what that was? It could just be someone leaving for work at the same time. But anyways, let's just get right to chapter 17. Chapter 17, Neesa's perspective. Fucking LA drivers. They were all trying to take a piece of me. Every other block, someone was either cutting me off or driving so close to my bumper that I had to double tap my brakes out of fear they might hit me. I sat at a stoplight, consumed by what had happened last night. The sex wasn't the worst of it. On the contrary, sex with Ben was the best. Triumphant, considering that I was practically a born-again virgin. Claire was right, but I'd never admit it to her. The crying afterward, though, I blushed now as I sat in traffic reminiscing about it. Leave it to me to start thinking about my ex in the middle of sex. What Ben and I had shared was beautiful, but I didn't get to celebrate my victory for even a second before turning into a pool of misery. Come morning, my reflection on our night together had a sobering effect. I didn't have buyer's remorse, as Ben had put it, but I had definitely woken up with reservations. Everything about last night was a rush of feelings, a rush toward sex, none of which I was ready for. When Ben talked about having feelings for me outside my car, I wanted to take that kite and sail it through the air out of his reach. No take-backsies, no returns. I had lived that life before, my head in the clouds, and the hot freaking mess I became as a result was still fresh in my memory. The light turned green and all the cars ahead of me slowly began to respond. I knew Ben wouldn't understand why I was keeping the date with David. I needed a comparison. Since David was the complete opposite of Ben in terms of personality and goals, I needed to try picking Mr. Right, Mr. Safe for once. By his own admission, Ben had gotten caught up on the emotional roller coaster along with me, which meant there wasn't a reasonable adult between us. Maybe his head was stuck in the clouds like mine was. I had no choice but to keep us in check. 10 minutes later, I parked in the lot below my building, caught the elevator to street level, and headed on foot toward Pete's. Taryn was there making my usual cup of perfection. He said, "Neesa, you're glowing. Did you get a facial or something?" He broke off with a gasp. No. He observed me more closely and pitched his head forward. His eyes went wide. He said, "You met him, didn't you, Mr. Wright?" I frowned. No, I couldn't tell him I'd had sex for the first time in years. I moved closer to him and lowered my voice and said, "Okay, I went out on a date last night, but I don't know. Things moved a little too fast, and the guy..." I frowned. "I don't have a good feeling about him. You remember the one from a few weeks ago, the one we teased?" Taryn's eyes bulged. "You mean tall, big-shouldered, and handsome? Girl, you need to one-click that bitch." I gave him a pained smile. "I'm serious. He reminds me too much of my old boyfriend, and we both know how that ended." I had confided in Taryn shortly after we met, and he gave a valuable gay man's perspective about what my ex had done to me. He handed me my drink, and I sipped it, letting it calm my nerves, while he started with the next order. He said, "It's not fair to hold him accountable for shit your ex-boyfriend did. How was the SEX?" Straightening my back, I blushed and swiveled my head toward the guy next to me, who smiled. I shook my head and said, "We didn't have sex." I leaned over the counter and whispered to Taryn, "What makes you think I had sex with him?" Taryn laughed. "That right there. I can read you like a book." I said, "Wow, embarrassing." He pushed the stranger's drink to him and waved goodbye. When we were alone, he said, "You're freaking out over nothing. Get a grip and go out with him again. If you have a good time, then repeat. After a few dates, you'll know for sure he's Mr. Right." His words pulled me back from the ledge. He simplified it in much the way Ben had this morning. Take it slow. I could handle slow, I thought. Relieved, I sipped my coffee. Taryn said, "Notice I didn't say if he's Mr. Right." I gave him the side eye and dismissed him with the wave, thanking him for the latte on my way out. An hour and a half before lunchtime, I parked outside a property in the Hollywood Hills, waiting for my clients to arrive. Ben had been on my mind all morning, in every activity and every idle moment. Taryn's advice had been great, but what I needed were sound words from someone who knew me better than anyone. With 20 minutes to spare, I flipped through the contacts on my car's console and pressed the call button for Mom. The phone picked up on the fourth ring, and my ears were assaulted with loud talking in the background. She said, "Hi, honey." I asked, "Is it a bad time? I can call you later." She said, "No, baby, it's never bad time." I could hear her shushing people in the background. She was more candid than usual. She asked, "What is it? Something's bugging you, I can tell." Several women's voices burst out in laughter. I asked, "Where are you, Mom? Are you drinking?" Mom said, "What? It's a mimosa, practically a kid's drink." Laughter flooded the phone's receiver once again, and my mother shushed them. She said, "The girls are here. We're all getting pedicures. The nail salon's trying a more high-end business model with champagne and light hors d'oeuvres. I'm not complaining." Cheers rang out and glasses clinked. She said, "Now tell me what's wrong. You're always second-guessing yourself with men. Is that what it is, honey?" My mother had been doing this all my life. I could never get away with anything without her knowing about it. She called it spiritual. I called it spooky. It was futile to lie, but I had my pride. I said, "When's the last time I went on a date, Mom?" She said, "Ha, I knew it." Her voice got distant as she told her girlfriends. "I told you my daughter's finally seeing someone. After all these years." She came back on the line. "Let us help you, dear. Tell me, what's the problem?" I rolled my eyes. I didn't want to tell her whole crew, which I knew was the same as confiding in her. According to my mom, her trusted circle of friends had prayed the cancer away, a far-reaching claim as far as I was concerned. I would sooner have believed my dead ancestors helped more than that gaggle of 3 hens. I caught her up on the date I'd had with Ben, leaving out the sex part because she would have wanted to hear details. The conversation was embarrassing enough in front of her girlfriends, and then I told her about the date I'd promised David. She said, "No, no, no. Why are you distracted by this David character? I like Ben." I said, "I'm trying to turn over a new leaf here. Thought I might try the opposite of the type I've dated in the past." She said, What are you talking about? How has Ben the same as the guys in your past?" I said, "They were all about looks, and talk about immature." Mom said, "Neesa, you have to be attracted to the guy you're dating. Are you even remotely moved by this David character?" I said, "No." I sounded mopey even to my own ears. She said, "What are your instincts telling you?" I said, "Oh, screw my instincts. Or lend me some of yours. I mean, really? After the whole Tyson incident, you don't think my instincts are shot to hell?" Mom said, "I'd say your man picker was off, but I still think Tyson taught you a very valuable lesson. Look, Spirit has a plan for you, and it's not for you to question it, but to learn. I know you think Ben is the scary choice because he stalked you, as you say, and reminds you of the ex." She laid on the skepticism thick. She continued, "But I'm sensing he's being driven. No, drawn? Driven, pushed, whatever, toward you. It's not his choice, sweetheart. Does that make sense?" I heard a chorus of uh-huhs and yeses in the background. I said, "No, it doesn't make sense, but then you never do when you talk like this." She said, "But am I ever wrong?" I mouthed the answer in unison with her response, "No." She continued, "And besides, didn't you say the chemistry with him is off the charts?" I said, I didn't say that, Mom." She talked over me, "But it's true." I said, "Come on, we're attracted to each other, yes, but that's just it. We're all chemistry, but we make no sense. With his past, I'm scared he's going to break my heart. And with my past, I can't take that chance. I have to protect myself." Mom said, "Protect yourself, honey. Real love is a wild stallion running full out on the plain. There's no harness involved, no protection, as you put it." Love? Love? My vision began to go topsy-turvy and I closed my eyes. Love wasn't part of it. I said, "Mom, please come back down to earth. We're not in love. You're like 1,000 steps ahead and it's making me nervous." She went quiet for a moment and I could almost hear her cogs turning. She said, "Look at your life. You've grown since your last relationship. The guy who's right for you will match where you're at now, not 5 years ago. He's ready to confront things, is he not?" I remembered what he said about his father. He told me he wasn't ready to meet the guy, but I sensed the opposite. And I too was in the middle of a transformation of sorts, taking another stab at love for the first time in years. Mom continued, "What about the other guy, David? He didn't seem odd to you?" I frowned. "No, why? I mean, I'm not really attracted to him, but he's nice and safe. He's the kind of man every mother wants her little girl to marry. I don't know, I thought I'd try to date someone normal, someone who's run of the mill for a change." The line grew silent again, and then I heard the women whispering something I couldn't make out. I said, "I can hear you guys. What are you saying?" Mom said, "Neesa, honey." She sighed heavily. "Is this David soft?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "What do you mean soft?" She said, "Like effeminate, the opposite of manly." I said, "Well, yeah, but Mom, I seriously doubt David is gay. He's just nerdy. You should have seen the way he confronted Ben. It was a little scary, but impressive. Mom said, "Watch the patterns, honey. You were engaged to a gay man you thought was straight." I said, "Tyson told me he was straight." Mom said, "Did he really?" I said, "He was living a straight life with me." Mom said, "Hindsight is 20/20, dear." I said, "But—" I shook my head as if I could shake the reasoning out of her statement. "That was an isolated incident. A major one, I'll grant you, but—" Mom said, "He wasn't the first. Remember Kenny?" I jerked my head, stunned. "Kenny wasn't gay. He was a slut. He cheated on me with Laura and I dumped him." Mom said, "His sister Rachel told me he just moved to Chicago to live with his boyfriend. And what about Jason?" I said, "Oh, come on. Jason was as straight as they come. You're not going to tell me he's gay too." Mom said, "No, but I remember how he never treated you with respect, never took you seriously. He's married to Susan now, and she was never much of a looker. They have 3 bratty sons, and each of them takes turns bossing her around." I said, "What does that have to do with David?" Mom said, "I just have a feeling about that guy. He's not good to women. You're at a crossroads, honey, a test. One guy represents what's behind you, and the other what could be your future." She made it sound easy, like flipping a coin, but this was my life. I said, "Look, Mom, I gotta go with my gut, which is what you told me to do in the first place. I promise you, David's harmless, and it's just a date, one date." Mom said, "I hear you. People come into your life for a reason. There's something to be learned from both these men. But can I let you in on a little secret? Confronting fear is what shines the light on your path. That's why it's hard. Do what you feel is right, but keep this Ben guy close, okay? I slumped in my seat, defeated. All right, Mom, gotta go. Mom said, "Aw, honey, I wish I could make these decisions for you." More discussion ensued in the background. If only I knew what they were saying. She said, "Whatever choice you make is the right one, the one you need. Be careful, okay? Call me later. I love you, baby." I said, "Love you too." The line went dead. It wasn't like me to need reassurance, but when it came to men and relationships, my confidence was a shadow of what it used to be. She didn't tell me not to go out with David, and Ben never told me why he had investigated the guy. I wasn't about to cancel based on a bunch of blind warning. David had scheduled our date for Wednesday, hump day. It was odd, but who was I to judge? Annabelle was bummed since I had to cancel our paranormal night, the same night her husband kicked her out of the house for his weekly Dungeons and Dragons game. I tried to change the date with David to keep my standing girls' night with Annabelle, but he wouldn't budge. Lucky for Annabelle, one of her husband's D&D mates was hosting the game this time, and Jeff wanted her home. 3rd Street was busy as I pulled up to the valet in front of the little door. It was quite the celebrity spot back when I was still acting, and Tyson used to bring me there for dinner. He liked all the attention of the paparazzi and would call my publicist to tip them off whenever we dined there. He tried to convince me it was good for my reputation to make appearances. I hated the idea of appearing to have some great Hollywood life when all I wanted to do was veg out in front of the TV while memorizing my lines. It was quite a coincidence that David picked the same place for our first date. Sure, it was the quintessential date spot, dark, with small tables, big prices, and big menu items like foie gras. Impressive if one liked the idea of eating tortured animals. I did not, but that wasn't the bad part. I would spend the whole night reminded of the worst time in my life. To David's advantage, the sky was the limit when you started at rock bottom. Perhaps if he could dazzle me with his personality, that might work in his favor. I left the car idling as the valet parking attendant opened the door for me. I stepped out, hoping I wasn't too underdressed in my work clothes, even if it was a weeknight. He hadn't texted me our destination till a few hours before, and I didn't have enough time to go home and change. Since my date with Ben a few days ago, working out our sexual chemistry had only shifted it into overdrive. I was so resistant to choosing him that I had mentally exhausted myself, ignoring his texts and messages for the past few days. I rounded the end of the car and was surprised to find David standing a few feet from the curb. I said, "How long have you been here?" He said, "A few minutes." The second valet parking attendant gave him a strange glance, but David didn't miss a beat. He said, "You look beautiful." Relieved that he didn't mind my outfit, I stepped onto the sidewalk and into his open arms. He held me to a point just this side of awkward. Our first date, and a bystander would have thought it was our 10th. As far as first impressions went, it wasn't great. Then he bent over to kiss me. Like, what? What kind of bizarro world had I slipped into? I turned my cheek at the last moment. When I stepped back, his mood had darkened, as if I were staring into the face of the same guy who had challenged Ben at the Silver Lake showing a few days ago. Already, this felt like a mistake. I'd kept the date with David as a litmus test, and I was beginning to see what Ben and my mom had warned me about. I missed Ben, and David and I hadn't even entered the restaurant yet. Maybe I shouldn't have resisted his efforts to reach me all week. I smiled and prayed the evening would get less weird. David asked, "Shall we go in?" I experienced a little deja vu as we approached the front door that wasn't really little at all, contrary to the restaurant's name. It was beautiful, though, as if it had been plucked from some old dilapidated Parisian farmhouse. Once we were inside, the space was quite intimate with a compressed grid of candlelit tables. Vines and stream lights woven into a tight pattern arched over the patio, giving the illusion of a low-hung ceiling and insulating the space from the busy street noise outside. The host showed us to a table in the far corner, which Tyson would have hated. He'd like to sit in the middle of the room, where everyone could see us. David didn't seem to mind, pulling out my chair and then taking his seat across from me. After the host handed me a menu, she excused herself. I noticed an important detail missing. I asked, "Where are the prices?" David's eyes twinkled from the candlelight. He said, "Surprise! Since I'm the one paying, I had them print a special menu for you." I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. He didn't know I used to come here on the regular. He might have been trying to impress me, but after his presumptuous greeting, his actions came across as controlling rather than romantic. He said, "Can I recommend something? They're known for their foie gras." Now we were getting into cheesy territory, and I wish I meant the stream kind. Heck, even the blue and stinky variety would have been a step up from this cheap rhetoric. Our waiter showed up before I had a chance to respond. He said, "Denise?" With his French accent, it sounded like he called me Denise. He said, "What a pleasure to see you. It's been a while, no?" I said, "Gerard, hi!" And he leaned down to kiss each cheek in turn. I said, "Glad to see you're still here. I have to say it was hard to come back after my breakup." Gerard said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, hopefully we'll see more of you in the future." I said, "Maybe. This is David. We're having our first date tonight." Gerard said, "Yes, we met already." He placed 2 glasses on the table and presented a bottle of wine to me. As Gerard opened it, David explained, "I brought this from my private collection. It's a Pinot Noir. Should go well with most of the dishes here." I fought an eye roll and settled on guilt instead because I didn't appreciate the gesture. How could I? The man showered me with money and all I could do was feel obligated. This must have been exactly how Annabelle felt with her husband. Perhaps the royal treatment was lost on me because of the deliverer. I knew if a certain person were here instead of David, I'd be having a much better time. Much steamier time, too. Once we ordered, David wasn't as talkative as he'd been on the day I met him. His attention turned more inward, and I couldn't shake the annoying sense he was hiding something. I asked, "So what do you do?" Sounded so cliche, but I didn't want to spend the meal in total silence. "I mean, in regard to your interests, it doesn't matter to me how much money you make." He remarked, "Well, that's refreshing," but I didn't get the hidden meaning. He continued, "It's boring. I'm a computer tech guy. Isn't everybody these days?" I said, "Totally." He didn't elaborate, which was odd since we were supposed to be getting to know each other. I hadn't dipped into the dating pool in a long time, but last I remembered, guys like to talk about themselves a lot. I said, "Is that how you know Ben?" I knew it wasn't, but David didn't know that. I had to get to the bottom of their relationship. David said, "You mean Reuben? That's his real name. I'm more curious how you met him." Once again, I found myself talking to hostile Dave. He stared at me, waiting for an answer. "Reuben, huh? I guess he likes to be called Ben. I met him at a bar a month ago. How about you?" He said, "Are you dating him?" His tone rubbed me the wrong way, and I sat up straighter in my chair. Maybe once we got past his obvious insecurities, we could enjoy dinner. I said, "I did go out with him, once." This time I waited for another flippant response. He sipped from his glass and said, "You haven't tasted your wine yet. I brought it especially for you." I grabbed the glass and hastily sipped it, inhaling the liquid by accident. As I struggled to get my coughing fit under control, I wondered what he had done with the nice, charming man who had plans to start a family. The man across from me suffered from emotional Tourette syndrome. I said, "I'm sorry. It's delicious, I swear. Thank you." And I meant it. So far, it was the highlight of our time together. He smiled, pleased with my appreciation and perhaps taking it a bit too personally. His face appeared sweet again, his expression one of a young man hoping to please me and gain my approval. He said, "Are you going to see him again?" And in the next breath, the wolf peeked out. He was exasperating. I didn't like being interrogated. I said, "I don't know." He said, "Do you have feelings for him?" I said, "What difference does it make? I'm on a date with you. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of things are up in the air about both of you because I don't know you yet. If it bothers you that I went out with him, I can leave." Leaving suddenly seemed like a great idea. I hoped he'd take the bait. His stance went from stiff to relaxed in the blink of an eye. He said, "No, don't be silly. I'm only concerned because he was bothering you that day at the house. You can do better than a creep like him." The more chaotic his mood swings got, the more my heart raced. I wondered why Ben had been investigating him. Not that it mattered, because I knew after tonight I'd never see David again. At the moment, he appeared so calm and collected on the outside that I thought I might be going crazy. No one was truly this mercurial. Maybe he was just nervous. I said, "I'm not comfortable talking about him on our date. Let's talk about something else. How does a young, successful guy like you have trouble finding a wife?" He said, "I don't. Well, I mean, it's hard, searching for a needle in a haystack. There are a lot of women in LA, but not all of them are the kind you'd want to marry. They either want money or to live a certain lifestyle. I guess you could say I have high standards. But that's why I asked you out. I said, technically, I did the asking. His eyes lit with laughter. Right, I guess you're the one with good taste then. Oh, God, I thought. Waiter, please remove the cheese from the table. When the waiter returned, the energy lifted enough that after he took our order, I almost begged him to grab a seat. This would have been a good time to have a backup plan. One of the girls could have texted me to pretend there was an emergency. Why hadn't I thought of that before? David said, "You know, I think I recognize you." My heart dropped. Anytime I heard that phrase, I had a mini anxiety attack. Fans weren't supposed to recognize me, not since I had my head shaved. And David was the last person I expected to know the actress, as I referred to my old self, but then it made sense. I had a slew of techie fans from a movie I did at the beginning of my acting career. He said, "Weren't you in that movie Death Tune? I've played with your character on the video game version. Your hair looks so different now, but I'm right, aren't I?" Well, my name was the same, so I said, "Wow, good on you. Most people don't recognize me." He said, "Come to think of it, I met you at Comic-Con last year. You must have had," he waved his hand around his head, "a wig on. It looked totally real." I said, "Yeah, it's part of the costume. It wasn't at the time I'd filmed the movie. I'd been meaning to stop going to those events, but my old agent guilted me into it every year until this year, the first year I had refused." He said, "I'm surprised you don't remember me." It was hard not to roll my eyes. I said, "Oh God, you meet so many fans at those things. It's impossible to remember anyone." I thought, okay, change of topic. He must have recognized me at that house showing, which would explain why he stared at me the whole time. Even if everything else had gone right on this date, he would have lost his chance with me on this admission alone. He said, "I still play the game, you know. Your avatar even sounds like you. It's uncanny." I said, "Well, I did the voiceover for it, so it is me." He said, "How come you don't act anymore? The tabloids said you walked away from a role on that show. What's it called? Infected? You must be kicking yourself over that. It's so huge." This date was turning into my worst nightmare. Instead of spending an evening with a potential boyfriend, which I could see now he'd never been, I was stuck on an obligatory hours-long meet and greet with a fan. This was not what I had signed up for. Painful as it was, I summoned up a polite tone. "Not at all. I have no regrets. Fame behind the scenes is not as glamorous as fans think it is. I love my life way more now. After having my personal life fed through the media machine for public consumption, my anonymity means everything to me. It's priceless." The next hour crawled by at a snail's pace, with plenty of drawn-out silences, so painful I excused myself to the bathroom and stalled there for almost 15 minutes. When I came back, I lied about having an upset stomach and talked David out of dessert so I could end the torture. We finally stood at the curb where I handed the valet my ticket and waited for them to pull my car around. I watched as David did the same, and then we stood a short distance from the entrance. Normally I'd hate this part of the date where I had to let the guy down easy, but for the first time I couldn't wait to tell him in no uncertain words that I never wanted to see him again. It was what I practiced during my 15-minute bathroom break. I said, "I'm so sorry about dinner, David. The food and wine were beautiful, and I appreciate the special touches you added, but I also don't want to string you along. I'm afraid a connection wasn't there for me." He stayed silent for so long that I assumed those might be the absolute last words between us, which would have been fine, except I also didn't want to follow up call to try again. He had spent so much money and effort that I didn't want him to think I had used him. The longer he stared at me, the more I kept talking, making a bad situation worse. I said, "You're a nice guy." Shit, I thought. Didn't guys hate when you told them that? I continued, "I'm sure you'll find the perfect match to build a family with. I just don't think it's me." Still nothing, not even a blink. I kept going. "I just prefer to be upfront and honest, David. I'm sorry it didn't." He said, "Work out? You don't have to repeat yourself. I heard you the first time." He startled me with his sudden reanimation. "I totally pegged you wrong. Reuben said you fucked him after your date, so I figured you'd at least throw me a bone. But I see how it works now." His words pierced like an ice pick to my heart. I said, "He what?" The words squeezed out on a whisper. I had almost no air to speak them with. I wanted to throw up for real because he knew I had dated Ben before he'd asked me about it. David continued, I guess you prefer the blue-collar type. Too bad they're the type that likes to kiss and tell. I said, you expect me to believe you two are friends? He made a face as if he'd swallowed a bug. God, no. He called me to brag about you. He thought I wouldn't want to go out with you once he'd fucked you. And he was right. I almost canceled, but then I suspected he might be lying. I'd say based on your reaction, he wasn't. You don't really know him at all, do you? I was transfixed. This was what it was like to be punked, minus the humor. I was no stranger to this sensation. My ex had given me plenty of practice. This, however, was just cruel. I stood there stunned, embarrassed beyond belief. I could no longer feel my face. I had crawled somewhere David's words couldn't reach me anymore. He said, oh, did you think he actually had feelings for you? He laughed. I guess pretty girls are as dumb as they look. He waved a hand in front of my unblinking eyes. Hello, Earth to Denise. I believe that's your car. After a beat, I swallowed. Then I walked up to him and slapped him hard across the face. My hand stung from the impact. The pain reminded me that I was still alive. I'd knocked his head to the side with the blow, but he didn't flinch or bother to touch his face. Under the streetlights, I could see 5 distinct welts rising to the surface, and he wasn't smiling anymore. Good. The valet guy appeared beside us. He said, Ma'am, is everything okay? Sure, I thought. My keys, I asked, voice shaking. He said, they're in the car, man. My hand trembled from pent-up anger, and with jerky movements, I slipped the attendant $10 for the parking fee plus tip. I stepped down off the curb, but before I got in my car, I glanced back once more. The mark I'd left now stood out in stark red relief on his cheek. His empty gaze was haunting. I couldn't drive fast enough to get away from him. That concludes chapter 17. It's pretty intense, so hopefully you're excited to get to the next chapter 18. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe and hit the little bell icon so you'll be notified when the next chapter goes up. And I will see you there.